Welcome back to Kintsugi Heroes, helping people tell the stories they need to share so you can find the stories that you need to hear.
In this episode, John Millam is in conversation with Margo Strong, a creative business leader with a rich family history. Margo shares her journey from growing up in Sydney with Dutch immigrant parents to founding and running a well-known Apple computer business, Mac and Me, in Avalon on Sydney's northern beaches. She talks about the challenges she faced in her personal life, including marriage, motherhood, business, and loss. This conversation explores resilience, change, and finding peace after difficult times. Listen as Margo reflects on family, business, and the quest for joy.
So, ladies and gentlemen, listeners of the Kintsugi Heroes podcast, welcome to another one. And this is a little, I confess to having this one as a something that I've pushed, because today we're talking to someone who is not just an amazing person with an amazing story, but is a friend of mine, and I have not spoken to her enough in recent years. So, listeners, please forgive me that I am killing two birds with one stone. That is, we're recording a podcast, and I get to talk and catch up with the amazing Margo Strong. Welcome to Kintsugi Heroes, Margo.
Thank you very much, John, and thanks for having me on.
No, my pleasure indeed.
Nice to have a chat.
It's fabulous to have a chat. You were born in Australia, just by way of introduction, but you have a very strong Dutch heritage to refer to, and of course, relatives and so on still in your life in Holland. But you were like a creative person, right? So like you went to art school in Holland, you were in the printing industry, right? And then somehow that turned into being a kind of iconic business on the northern beaches in Sydney in Apple computers, right? So, the entire place would know Margo from Apple, from Mac and Me, right? For which you did for what, so long, 20 years or something? So
yeah, 20. Yeah, that's
wow.
Right. It goes fast.
So how did you become a sort of small business icon in technology with all of that creative urges?
Well, because I was in pre-press, which wasn't really graphic design, it was the in between graphic design and getting things to the printing press technically, I guess, which was all film. And then in the 80s, it went to these pagination systems that were worth millions of dollars, and desktop publishing wasn't quite there yet. It was just starting. So in the 90s, in the later 90s, when my kids were little, I was trying to do some sort of business from home. So I became an Adobe, and by then, myself and my ex-husband now had a bit of stuff going on at home, just doing some desktop publishing. But I just thought I'd try and become an Adobe channel partner, because I was pretty okay with Photoshop and Illustrator and stuff in those days.
Wow.
And so I got the Adobe channel partner license thing and started selling Adobe stuff. And then I thought I might just write a business plan and see, if I can get an Apple reseller thing. And Bing Apple just went, yes, okay, which was bizarre, because there was a hole with people in the graphic arts getting computers. The closest place was Chatswood, and Apple didn't own any shops at that stage. They didn't own shops till the later 2000s. So, there was a big gap with being able to supply people professionally, unless the only way that Apple sold stuff generally was with consultants out on the road.
Yeah.
So, and that's nothing like it is today, like as far as the scope that they have and the market share that they have. So there was usually people hated Mac, or they loved Mac and they hated theirs or loved, so it was a bit like that. So so I wrote a business plan that, I don't know, just pulled numbers out of the air, basically. Opened up a little shop at Avalon, and the business executive that approved that plan, like if I ever run into him, we're still mates. He's since left Apple, but he said he just started at Apple, and he just went, yep, okay, sounds good. Tick the box. So there you go. But people thought I was mad for opening that shop at Avalon. And that was before the office works and all
Yeah.
those sorts of shops happened. So I was used to a lot of printers and ink and all that sort
Yeah.
of stuff, and shelves of software,
Yeah.
computer classroom and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, so it was the whole idea was to work closer at home, to be around for the kids. But, it's sort of a catch-22 because you end up in your own business, not seeing your kids half enough than
Yeah.
what you'd like to. So yeah, so, and
It's,
then went to Avalon. I went to Newport when we needed a bigger shop.
and of course, opening a small business is is contraindicated for like chilling out. It's not.
Yeah, yeah. I've always sort of had that sense of urgency, though. I think whatever jobs I had, I always seemed to become, the foreman or do something that took on responsibility. I just couldn't seem to help myself for some reason. Instead of, so I was sort of that way inclined, I guess, so yeah. And parents being in business as well, they had a
But
Dutch.
let's go back to that whole. Now you were born in Australia, but your parents weren't long out here, were they? They
Yeah,
were.
they immigrated in 56, but Dad had been here. He got drafted into the army in Holland, and to escape the draft, he could immigrate to Australia, where he already had two brothers. So he worked in Western Queensland for about 4 years,
Wow.
or the windmills, so on the water pumps with this
Oh wow.
Irish guy fixing them for months at a
What
time.
yeah, of course he was an
So
expert in
yeah,
windmills. Yeah.
and then he went back to Holland after 4 years, met Mum, married her, and spent all the money he'd saved on a house on the wedding. So,
Wow. So
that's how I was.
so you weren't part of the decision to come here. How do you think your folks, they came to Australia, which is such a different place, right? Especially at that time of the year. How
Yeah.
how did they feel about it?
Look, I think Dad was Australian from the time he landed, but Mum was very difficult. It was she should have probably gone back to Holland. She was very homesick and quite alone. She was a pediatric nurse and
Oh, wow.
had a strong Dutch accent, so she wasn't really treated very well
Yeah.
in that industry. So she soon gave up nursing, and she was quite a specialist
Yeah.
nurse. Dad was a mechanical engineer, really. But they ended up working very hard and setting up a boarding house and a restaurant and just working like slaves, basically, So, I mean, like too
Yeah.
much work considering they were quite educated people. So it was hard. I mean, fine for Dad. His parents had died and everything. Mum's parents were still alive, and she had lovely brothers and sisters. So she left all of that great, family, social connections, and gave it all up, which was really hard for her.
Yeah.
Hard on us, when we were kids, because she was, you felt that, with her.
So
Yeah.
she's projecting a lot of homesick and stress and, disappointment.
Yeah. Yeah, she did really. And she was, I mean, she died in 2018, but she was a very beautiful person and very caring and very intuitive and, took the load for everything. She was very good at being very capable,
Yeah.
so which in a way was sort of her undoing a little bit because she was too efficient, so
Yeah.
but living in the restaurant in the house next door, and she didn't drive, so her world was very small,
Yeah.
compared to her life in Holland. And she didn't get married till she was 27, so that was sort of old, in those days. So, she was ticking the boxes for everybody else, I think, instead of herself, maybe. Yeah.
Interesting how obviously that the all hands with the family business and you're living in the thing, so you were very closely involved as well as your siblings were with the whole
Yeah.
business growing up. So is that
Yeah.
where your kind of expectation of running a business or your understanding of it came from?
Yeah, I think you learn a lot. Like, Dad was a super smart person, like very intelligent, very great mathematically, and in that sort of structural, technical way, I suppose. So yeah, I mean, they did everything, from all the stock. He learnt, he read that big French cookbook and knew how to be a chef. Mum taught him how to all the intricacies of it, but basically he was the chef.
Wow.
Mum sort of, yeah, did it. That learned. I think that learned, the capability came from learning from them, I suppose. But also the other thing too is that the work thing, nothing was more important than hard work.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
that became, a big priority, I suppose, in how we were reared, thinking, well, it was never like you couldn't sort of sit around. It was like, well, what are you doing? You know,
Mm.
you know, do this and do this on the way to doing that, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Did that you've gone on a very, different journey ever since, right? You got out of that. But, how much of your childhood, is part of your everyday now?
Oh, a lot, I think. I think as you get older and you have time as well, you reassess, why, people behaved and did things and made choices the way they did, and also a lot of unsaid things. Like people sometimes sort of, I think, glorify the past and think that they were the good old days, but really there was a lot of unsaid things that happened in people's lives that weren't really addressed, and that wasn't okay. So, yeah, so I do think about it. I suppose you can't help but think, well, I don't know if everyone's the same, but you do think about your childhood a lot. It leaves a big imprint with the decisions you've made yourself, in your own life. And it still does, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
it's
Yeah.
kind of amazing. It takes like 50 odd years to start to get, the first layers of the onion off, right?
Yeah.
So,
And,
yeah.
and also, we didn't know a lot of things. Like, no one ever said when we were kids, oh, I'll go and get someone not really feeling well mentally.
Yeah.
You'd be put in an asylum and the door would be locked. It'd be like, oh, they're having, you'd only hear things, at a distant
Yeah.
distance, like, oh, that person had a nervous breakdown. And you'd be
Yeah.
thinking, a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
What is that? No, everyone used to think, what is that exactly?
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, they've gone to an institution. You're sort of thinking, there was no room for being vulnerable. I don't
No.
think you were allowed to be too vulnerable. Yeah. And as I read somewhere on Facebook or something the other day, this comedian saying, oh, don't worry, my mother was born in 1962. Boundaries were only invented in 2017. I sort
Yeah.
of think, yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably right.
Well, I love that idea of a nervous breakdown. Like it was so scary as a kid because
Yes, it was like,
your parents were susceptible. My mum ended up being and we weren't allowed past the initial door, so you always
yeah.
found yourself sitting in waiting rooms for pregnancies, right? You weren't allowed in the maternity
Oh,
ward
God, no,
or
no.
the special place where nervous breakdowns were. Yeah,
Yes, I used to always think, what actually happens in a nervous breakdown? Do all your nerves just melt or something?
yeah.
Like, things that you think when you're a kid, you're thinking, what exactly? But no one ever asked, like it was
And the idea is like there was
finite.
there was a subtle undertone that you were responsible for it. Like
Oh, yeah.
the kids were always the cause of nervous
Oh, kids are
breakdowns.
always in trouble. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
yeah,
Yeah, look what you did.
yeah. So speaking of kids, like you were growing up in a family that were like immigrant, right,
Yeah,
but an acceptable immigrant in sort of inner West Sydney and so on. So
yeah.
what was life like in then? Well, like what was your
Um,
experience?
Oh, well, we went to, in primary school, St. Pat's up the road, which is the local Catholic school. I mean, Summerhill's very trendy these
Mm.
days. We
Yeah.
were on the border. Summerhill was across the road. We were in Dulwich, and across the other road was Lewisham. So on Old Canterbury Road. So yeah, so we walked to Summerhill Station. It wasn't the place it is now. It was a little bit scary sometimes. There was some dog or sometimes you'd be followed to the state. I mean, there was a lot of homes in Dulwich, in Summerhill, those big old
Yeah.
homes that were actually homes for people with all sorts of mental illnesses and things like that. And so there used to be I remember in high school, I went to Bethlehem College at Ashfield, and sometimes you get the train from Summerhill to Ashfield, and there was a bloke that looked like Schultz from
Oh,
Hogan's
from
Heroes on the
Hogan's
train with
Heroes.
full camouflage gear on,
Oh,
who definitely was something.
my
Anyway,
goodness.
he was on the train sometimes, so that was a bit scary, but you're sort of thinking, oh, well, you know, you could just
Was
poke your head out of the red rattler and get the
yeah.
wind in your face. It was
The Red Rattler. Because I went to school at Stanmore, which is,
Oh,
just,
right. Yeah,
right
yeah,
next to
yeah.
you.
Well,
Um,
yeah,
and coming from the Northern Beaches, it was a very strange world. Summerhill, Lewisham,
yeah, yeah,
Stanmore, right, Newtown, Redfern.
yeah.
Um, and of course, there was a smell. And it was
Oh,
like,
the
came
wheat
from the
meal.
train tracks and the red rattlers, and or it was always kind of a slightly carbony smell in the area. Did you find that?
Yeah. Oh, I think there was a lot of pollution. I mean, a lot of people used to burn every weekend in
Yeah.
their, everyone had incinerators and things. There was the goods line just down the road from our place, which is now the light rail. There was the big wheat mills in Summerhill
Mm.
that are now apartments. And there was a few little industrial things around there. And then there were the planes and the trains and buses. And so there
Yeah,
was a
yeah,
lot,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it was. I just wanted to see some trees, so that was the main reason for me wanting to move to the Northern Beaches all those years ago. And yeah, so I don't know, Summerhill, look, there was a lot of Greek people where we lived, and a lot of old Australians and Italians. Italians, the Leichhardt
Mm,
restaurants were,
mm,
bustling with Italians, but Australians weren't really going there that much when I was a little kid. And
mm.
that's why Mum and Dad's restaurant did so well, because they had like an international French sort of menu.
Yeah,
Um, and, they were flat chat with business people, you know, coming out for business lunches and serving
right,
dinners
right.
and things. But it was a bit of a different world then. But Summerhill, I mean, they brought all the neighbours together. I've just been sort of chopping up some old family films that we had, and all the neighbours are in Mum and Dad's big lounge room. And, they're all going, oh, thank you, John and Anne, for, bringing us all together. And Dad said, well, if we didn't, none of you would have talked to each other, basically, which is probably exactly right. So
Yeah.
the immigrant people bringing in together all the neighbours, so they were very kind, inclusive, good people that way. Yeah.
So when you so the like it sounds fascinating. Of course, we put rose-colored stuff on it, but as you
Yeah.
said, at times it was scary, and it certainly wasn't full of we weren't living this rich and abundant life sometimes.
No,
What
it's
what was the best bits of
the
growing up?
childhood. Look, I think, the restaurant and the house that Mum and Dad, like we lived at the back of the restaurant, they had a 14-bedroom. Dad decided to, behind the restaurant, build a 14-bedroom boarding house for students and stuff. So one minute you're in room A, the next minute you're in room C, whatever. And then they bought the house next door. And I think in the little planet that was, the Amsterdam restaurant and Mum and Dad's world, you did feel very, very safe. There was a lot of things that probably should have been discussed that weren't, but they were good people, and there was no games. I think almost naively, we were sort of a little protected in that world from
Yeah.
um, things. I don't know. You were very safe in that world. I think. Yeah.
In some ways beautiful, but of course the
Yeah.
unsaid, as you pointed out, can
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
leaves ripples. What did we've discussed what you did. What did you want to do as you look back?
Well, I used to sort of go and sit in my bedroom for hours and just paint and draw.
Yeah,
So I wanted to be a children's book illustrator, really, when I was a teenager,
yeah,
and did lots of paintings and things like that. And then I was very lucky in a way. Mum and Dad used to have these people called the Arms Guild that used to come to the restaurant once a month, and they collected all Australian arms and history and everything. And the couple there that sort of ran that show, they took me to art galleries and things like that and introduced me to a lot of people. They were very supportive, much more than my own parents, basically. So, but anyway, that's just the way it was. I remember them going, oh, look, Margaret, look, her artwork's fantastic. And Mum's going, oh, yes, good, good, good. Anyway, it's all right. It's just the way it was. But and I was quite severely bullied in high school. So I decided to leave school. So I started year 11, which I actually started to really enjoy. And then I just sort of said to Mum and Dad, look, I think I need to leave. And they went, oh, okay. But I sort of thought, that's funny. They didn't even really
Yeah,
convince me to stay. So Dad said, well, we're going to send you to art school in Holland. So I went there, but then I couldn't stay because they'd become Australians before I was born, and I
right.
couldn't get a visa. And then I came back, and ended up in the printing industry, which was like a creative area. So what I wanted to do, yeah, I don't know. At the time, I think it was art. Yeah, just, I love music as well. But yeah, so I don't know.
When did you realize that that wasn't going to happen?
The art thing?
Hmm.
I don't know. I think you just get swept away. I started an apprenticeship. I was the first girl ever employed by this 80-year-old company. I didn't know till the day I started. And all the other ladies were told to not swear and take down their girly pictures.
Yeah.
Anyway, they were like brothers. They were the kindest, loveliest people I've ever worked with. And the guy that owned Heartland and Hyde, where I did my apprenticeship, he owned half of Vogue Australia. So we had Vogue and Heartland and Hyde in this building, in the 8-story building. It was like the Devil Wears Prada. It was like that, literally. It was hilarious days. And you just end up in a field, and then you work, and then you get better at that, and then you do that, and yeah, the job was good. It was hard work, but it was good. Yeah. And I just stayed in that industry, really. You don't really think, oh, I could stop and go to uni or do this or that. I did have lots of letters written by Dad to me in Holland when I was there going, I think you should come back and you should go back and finish high school, and then you should go to uni and do art direction. And I can't remember reading any of those letters. It didn't go in. So I don't know. You're pretty young.
You've had a talent for picking industries that will eventually sort of fade away.
Yeah. Well, I can remember in the 80s, I was lucky enough to, where I did my apprenticeship, I was there for about 5 years, and then I moved to a place called Colour Scanners in Marrickville on Addison Road. And they were the first place in Sydney to buy an Israeli Cytec system, which was high-end pagination and retouching. So you could retouch an image and miraculously blow it up to another size instead of having to retouch 10 sets of film for 10 different publications and get them all to match. So, I could see then that the writing was on the wall that, that trade was going to die. But a lot of people I worked with didn't want to believe that. When the kids were little, I worked at a place called Seven out at Chiswick, and we got time transmitted from the States and put in Australian content. It was go, go, go. It's always running to get everything to the press, and Elle and People and Who and all those magazines. But even then, they had a floor of people still doing, manual film planning and retouching. But that didn't last very long. So, yeah, I think I was doing 3 days in a row for 12 hours each with tiny little kids. So, I think Matisse was still 1.5 years old. So that was hard work for a while.
Yeah. Wow. So of course, you're talking about children. How old, you got married, right? How did that happen?
Well, I met my ex-husband or my husband at the time, at TAFE as soon as I got back from Holland, basically. And yeah, I was very young. I got married when I was 20.
My goodness.
So, things that's what I mean. Life sometimes, and I just sort of go with the flow a lot, which sometimes goes against me, because I remember Jeff and I were living together at a flat at Eastwood, and we were too scared to say that we were actually more than just friends from TAFE, and because he was in the same trade, and then so we ended up getting engaged, and then thinking, oh, we'll probably get married in a few years. And then Dad said, well, this was in the September of, I don't know, 82, I think. And Dad said, why don't you bring it forward till next Easter, because Tante Dinny and Tante Annie and all these tantes are coming from Holland. And I just went, oh, all right. So that's how life was. Didn't really think too much about anything, just did it. So I was married for 23 years, but that all fell over in the end. But the outcome was, of course, 2 beautiful children, Matisse and Bianca, who are 30 and 34 now, or 33.
23 years. Do you think that there's often a time for everything, and given you were just flowing into that relationship, do you feel 23 years, was that too long, too short? How do you feel about the rate of the success?
Too long.
Too long.
I for me, I didn't know who I was. I was a kid, when I got married. And, I made those decisions for my life. You know, I don't blame my ex-husband or blame anyone except for myself for not knowing who I was. And I think, you know, unfortunately, I didn't give myself the chance in my 20s to discover who that person was really, you know. But there were a lot of really good times. You know, we had a lot of great times, and I didn't have Bianca till I was 29. So we went and lived in England for a year and worked there, and you know, so there was a lot of really good things. But I think a lot of it was for the fact that I didn't know who I was, you know. So I think
There
when you
was
get that young, it's a bit of pot luck as to whether it works out or not. Really, it's no one's fault, you know.
yeah.
Mm.
There was no you know, nowadays, like young women, you know, your daughters, for instance, right? They don't have an expectation of needing to, you know, there's no pressure on them to get married or to get into a
Mm.
relationship or push them in a
Mm.
certain, you know, oh, these are milestones, you need kids. Nearly,
Yeah,
like the stats, I think, say, you know, 1/4 of all 18-year-old females at this point will remain childless.
yeah.
And
Well,
yeah.
if I look back at my parents, I think Dad and Mum were they weren't the sort of people that thought, you know, you should get married in this. I think I latched onto Jeff to escape. My mother's behaviour wasn't really great. I was very depressed. I
Yeah.
was starting my apprenticeship and still worked in the restaurant on the weekends, and he was my escape, you know.
Yeah.
And I have to give him credit for that because he pulled me out of that situation of being able to say no to Mum and Dad, which was very hard. You know, you just didn't want to let them down. So, you know, that whole enmeshed, you know, thing that goes on.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, you know, I needed to get out of that situation and but I was just so young, you know, it was 16, 17 or whatever, you know, 17. I started school too young. I was always a year younger than everyone in my class, which didn't help
No,
socially at
no,
all.
no.
And yeah, so everything, you know, you're a lot younger for everything really. So, yeah, so I think that, you know, I put that pressure on myself really um, to to do these things in life. It wasn't really, you know, Mum and Dad doing it. You know, it was just a way of escaping that household, maybe. You
Mm.
know,
Yeah. It
as
makes a
kind as
lot of
they were.
sense.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, so and when all of that happened, we were both in the business at the time, the divorce, and then I ended up keeping the business and then becoming a service centre and actually expanding it. So that was sort of good.
Was that about you deciding it was time in some way, or having having the requirement to start to put yourself together? You know, you said you didn't know who you were. Was that about you, you know, finally taking that job on, of finding out
Well,
who?
I actually started the business and then Jeff left work and joined me.
Right.
And then when we were divorced, it was actually quite upsetting because I had a lot of suppliers going, well, all right, we'll see how you go
Oh
without
no. Yeah.
him. And I'm going,
Yeah.
well, I was actually doing all of
Yeah.
that stuff anyway. Anyway, so we had that. But I think the whole thing of being married so young and possibly to you know, the whole thing is being true to your own values and
Mm.
core beliefs. And when things aren't making sense for you and you're trying to make them work, um, you know, and it's not working, you're just not getting anywhere. Like I never imagined my marriage would fail. You know,
Yeah.
I never had that in my mind.
Yeah.
But it got to a point where I thought I can't live in this way anymore. And it wasn't healthy. I
No.
didn't think for the kids at the time. It
Mm.
wasn't fair on them. It wasn't the house that I grew up in as much as it was chaotic, but it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
You felt sort of safe and loved. So yeah, yeah.
Coming out of that relationship, right, as you say, you've got a business to run, you've got kids to raise, right, and now you're on your own. What was the great challenge for you?
Oh, financial, absolutely. We lost our house and lost everything. And I'd set up a $20,000 credit card to support the kids. That
Mm.
first year out of moving out of our home we'd been in for 17 years. So that was hard, you know, but I did believe the business was an untapped opportunity,
Mm.
you know, and I felt that weight off so I could actually go ahead and do all those things, you know, and that was a big relief, that
Mm.
part of it. But the challenge was financial at the time and also having, you know, Matisse had started high school and Bianca was moved from Northern Beaches to Barrenjoey, which was, a challenging time for everyone, I think. So yeah, not enough of one person isn't enough to cater for, all the things that needed to be done. Yeah, that was difficult, but we all got through it. I mean, when I look back now, I might have done things a little bit differently in some ways, but I don't know. You've got to do the best you can at the time. You do the best you can at the time, rather. So
You
yeah.
don't have any, no one's giving you any instruction booklet for like repairing after
No,
a broken heart. Yeah.
broken up, exactly. Yeah. And I think, and also, your life's broken, it's in pieces. And, it's a very courageous thing to leave a marriage because you end up financial train wreck. I mean, most people do, and that's the decision you've got to make. A lot of people stay in marriages because financially you'll just be destroyed if you leave. So, So, but I just thought if I don't do something, I'll be sick, I'll just end up ill. So, yeah. And, yeah. Mm.
So plus, so plus is, that freedom, that sense of positivity, maybe some energy back, challenging. You've got to rebuild the structure of life, right?
Yeah.
So you dive into work. What it was, you were a woman in a male-dominated industry.
I
What was
was.
that like?
I always seem to be in male-dominated industries like the printing.
The,
I don't know
the
how that
first
happened.
woman in a
Well,
service
yeah,
center.
it's very
Yeah,
funny.
yeah,
And yeah, it's funny because I remember my sister worked for me for a while. And I remember this Swiss guy coming into the shop going, "Oh, a computer shop run by women. Very interesting." Anyways, yeah. Well, I don't know. It was sort of retail,
yeah,
but as we're selling computers, and if people came back in going, "Well, there's something the matter with this," I was sending stuff to Macmedic, who were great, very supportive in Mossman to help do all the warranty stuff. So I thought we need to become an authorised service provider ourselves so we can run a test and have access to Apple's global service system, which is absolutely an amazing system. So, so that's what ended up. We went down that road and set up a multi-user point of sale system and things we didn't have, that were just stopping the business from growing. Yeah, so it was, I always found like when I bought Apple product, I bought off a distributor. And this was when there were still Apple centers around before Apple opened up their shops. So instead of aspiring to become, say, an Apple center where you might get a little bit better margin,
yeah.
I stayed, not that I would have done or could have done that anyway, but this group that I was in with the suppliers, so people like me, lots of independent businesses around Australia, like the guys in Cairns and the guys in Byron Bay and everything, we'd all be part of this group. So we had a better voice when it came to talking to Apple. And then we'd meet a few times a year, but I was the only woman most of the time. Yeah. So strangely enough, I don't know why.
What's different about a woman running a business in that kind of traditional male space?
Oh, look, I think a lot of people that are very technical are very precise. They mightn't be great at communicating where you're at to the client, because they're so intent on being perfect at their job, and so they like to tell clients when there's an actual result, not when there's all the in-between parts. So I think the strength of my business was that we had a lot of females and we had a lot of males, and it just worked out well together because we could be just anticipate the agony your clients going through when they've possibly lost everything, all of their data and everything, and actually communicate that to them rather than just going, we're trying to get the data, that we'll call you when it's done type of thing or something like that. So there was it was great to have everyone on board that way, and it's amazing how many people assume that women absolutely know nothing about, technical stuff. So I had a few staff members for me who were actually exceptionally great at technical stuff that were female. So, yeah.
So not just a business, but an activism, a centre for activism.
Well, it wasn't planned. It just turned out that way, And and I don't know, I think because of the values that we've learnt from my father and my mother, that there was no jobs for boys or girls in our household. It was everyone can do everything. There was no barrier that way to ever saying, oh, you can't do that because you're a girl. Like there was no such discussion. So we never grew up with that sort of view in any way, you know.
Working with Apple was never easy. What's your
Um,
thoughts?
Look, I think I always had a really good relationship with Apple. The margins were pretty shocking. And but you know, I learned a lot about running my own business from them because of the way that they, you know, the infrastructure and just their systems and processes and all sorts of things that were great. Um, yeah, it was hard at times with, well, the margin was the hardest thing because it was so low, but
Yeah.
stock sometimes was difficult. The first year that we had the shop at Avalon, oh, the Wild West, really, when you think about it, those days, my God. Um, I think we had to buy off a distributor and there was no stock, and that was the very first Christmas we were open. This was like November, December. Anyway, so I think that we bought secretly off another place in town, another reseller, and got like a 2% margin or something just to get some stock, you know.
Yeah.
And anyway, and then it turns out the distributor that we were allocated from Apple, in those days, there was sales tax. That was before, you know, the year 2000 with GST. And so sales tax, there was 36% on computers and nothing on software or consulting, right? So or services. So you're trying to, and then we had an exemption number because we're in the graphic arts trade, so you could buy stock with an exemption number, and then on sell it to someone else that had an exemption number, like another graphic designer or something. So it was a schmozzle with the paperwork. But so this distributor, they decided to use our tax-free, you know, exemption number and buy a whole lot of stock for their warehouse that they could then sell to other resellers and make some more margin. So I think they were put in jail, or I don't know, they were, you know, they were being chased anyway. So
As you said, Wild West, right?
yeah, it was
And of course, you know, you made that work for decades, right? So, you know, and became, you know, a part of the furniture, right?
yeah.
The Northern Beaches. But the you know, technology is going at an incredible rate, changing so quickly.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
COVID came, changed everything, and you decided it was time to shift.
Well, the service centre was a separate business to the retail store, so I'd handed the service centre to Macmedic, and they took over that servicing part. Things changed a lot with the Apple stuff. With I think probably 2013, 2011 to 2014 were probably our best years as far as trying to make some, you know, trying to keep your head above water, basically, and because we upgraded a lot of computers rather than, and that was the beauty of having the service center and the shop, that we could have clients that we could truly say, you know, like, you don't need another computer now. We can just fix this if, you know, or you can, you know, later on hand it to the kids and then you get yourself a new one, you know, whatever. So it was really good. We kept things alive as long as possible. But as soon as the technology changed and everything became SSDs, that you can't actually upgrade the hardware, that was the beginning of the end for trying to make any money at all out of servicing. And retail really never made any money out of anyway, basically. So, you know, so yeah, so I think that as soon as you couldn't upgrade things, but a lot of the, you know, we had a few guys out on site consulting and we were very good at that as well. And then I set up a training school for a while there, thinking we could sell people memberships and they'd come and learn, you know, all about their computers, but they needed their own computer. So there was no point having a classroom full of computers. And so that didn't make any money either, really. But anyway, it was a good experiment. It's risk taking, got to take some risks, I think.
There a lot of example out there for people coming in saying, you
Yeah.
know, be bold, be very bold and courageous.
Try
Yeah.
not to be stupid, but take a chance. I think I always had a gut feeling that you know, whatever I've pursued, you know, I've always thought this is, you know, in my head, I think, you know, you do the calculation, you go, it's got to work, you know, because you know, this part will work. And if that part doesn't work, then this part will work. So you're forever reinventing yourself every day, you know, because every day you've got to move and keep that, the flexibility there as well, you know, because plans go astray, you know.
They do.
And you
And of
don't
course,
know, you know, what's going to happen in the outside world. Look at COVID. I mean, you know.
that just blew everything up, didn't it? Yeah.
Oh, yes. I shut the retail shop a month before the COVID lockdowns, and that was just pure chance. You know, there was no plan there. So yeah.
Amazing. There's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying right around the business, but one thing I'm sort of, you know, one of the maxims I live by is what's true in one area of life is true in others, right? So, you know, that all that lesson you were learning, right, the ability to pivot and be adaptable and resilient and, you know, and explore, you know, the good out of, you know, the trouble. Was that manifesting in your personal life and the life of your family?
Well, a while after I divorced Jeff, I met Phil, um, and so we were together for probably about 11 years, and he unfortunately died of cancer. Um, and so yeah, so that was, I wasn't really planning for that to I mean, to meet someone, and I wasn't really thinking about it. But when I met him, he was so supportive and helpful and lovely and funny that couldn't help but fall in love with him, I guess. So, you know, but there was lots of things that he also went through personally as well, which I had to deal with. So yeah, it was challenging in some other areas, as you will know.
So the rescuer was still there, right, from early
There you
days,
are.
right? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
I got that lesson from you then. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
but Phil's journey, you know, like you know, the charm and the humor and so on, that was something you needed at the
Yeah.
time. What was when he became sick? What was like for you?
Oh, that was just a shock, an absolute shock, you know, and terrifying for him, of course. He was diagnosed with metastatic kidney cancer in October 2017 and died in the following. He died on April the 3rd, 2018, which is actually my wedding anniversary day as well. So
Oh my goodness.
not a good day.
The
But
universe sometimes knows, you know.
certain days.
Yeah. It says no.
That's
You're gonna
right.
get the full dose of this one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was horrendous because
Yeah.
he had cancer in his bones, and there was a lot of breaks, and it was just like a roller coaster ride. And I'm very grateful, you know, trying to run the business, and you know, my sister Anne Marie and my daughter Bianca, you know, were amazing. You know, they kept everything together, and all the other staff were wonderful. But you know, they kept everything going. They worked very hard whilst I was dealing with his, you know, when he was diagnosed. I remember we were at the oncologist, and I'd recorded I asked if I could record the conversation just to go back through.
Yeah.
And I can remember he said, "You have some spots in your bones." And I remember looking at Phil, and we just both knew that was it. The words didn't have to be said. You know, he didn't even have to say it. The oncologist just sort of knew. So it was just rampant after that. And the amount of morphine and medication and everything that he had was just unreal.
Yeah.
And, but I was lucky, I know, fortunate to be able to get him home for the last week or so, and he died in a hospital bed at home, which was such a great, you know, ending, I suppose, you know, for him.
With you know, that we talk about, you know, so often about finding the, you know, the gift in the tragedies and
Mm,
challenges and horrible
mm,
times,
yeah.
you know, that we're going to learn from it, and it's that experience that is the really important lesson. Um,
Mm.
is that, you know, are you, you know, did that happen? Did you find that gift, or are you still looking, or?
Still looking, probably. I
Yeah.
think, you know, the sadness and the grief is, you know, I mean, you know, it all, as you all know, the whole thing became bigger than that because Mum died, and then my
Yeah.
brother died. Um, so the grief sits with me all the time. You know, there's this permanent sadness, I suppose, that you live with, and you have to learn to live with it. But it's hard to pull yourself out of it. Yeah, hard to go forward and see some joy and stuff again. That's hard. Yeah, sometimes.
Do you mind if I ask you, another question around this space?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, happy to talk about it.
It's so powerful to hear you say how hard it is to, that grief is, kind of embedded in there. And of course your mother and your brother, right, around the same
Yeah.
time. Is it cumulative? Like, is sadness just like overwhelming? Like, as these events occur, does it get worse? Right?
Oh, I don't know. It just changes life, I guess, Oh, you're sad because they're not here. That's one thing. You can't talk to them. And especially my brother and Phil, they both got along so well. They were both similar, disposition.
Right.
So
Sparky fellows, right? So
funny,
like,
funny
bright
guys,
and
good
funny.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I just miss them. That's the sadness, is that you miss them, and maybe, it's a sign of the fact that, does love equal, cause grief? I mean, if you didn't love these people, would you be feeling these things, So, yeah, and mum, mum was sort of 91. She was sort of easing out of life. I could tell for the last year she was alive, she was switching off. But yeah, you just sort of think they were too young to die, those guys, 60 and 50. Yeah, 49, 50, 49 Phil was when he died. So yeah, so it was that's too young, so that was the sad part. But I think yeah, I don't know. I'm still trying to work out the grief thing. I think if the thing is to try and keep going, not let it consume you,
Yeah. Does the grief feel, again, like, please tell me to stop if you want to.
Yeah.
Does the grief feel like I love that idea that you're missing them, but is the grief about, their life, or is it, almost, is it you can't, be with them now? Like, so it's almost your life that causes the grief.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I miss the banter with them, I miss the banter with them. I think if I think the grief, sometimes I think, if some things in their life were done differently for themselves, if they saw some things differently themselves, that might have helped in some ways. Especially Paul, who suffered from depression and took his life, that was very hard, because suicide is a whole different ballgame to dying of an illness, I think, for
It's a
me,
different grief, isn't it? Yeah.
different grief. And also it's just such a, I'll always think, what could I have done differently to have changed that situation for Paul, or could I have done something differently? You ask yourself that question all the time. So yeah, so that's part of that grief, I think, is trying to work it out, but that will never happen, I don't think, We'll never really know that reason, yeah.
It's a big challenge you're giving yourself to say, take responsibility for, your brother's choices and, Bill's choices, do you think that's fair? Are you?
Oh, I'm not taking I don't take responsibility, but it doesn't. It's very hard for it to leave your mind, they both had struggled with different things through their life, and I think that the challenge for them was getting the right help and asking for help, which they really didn't do, they didn't do. And I think at the end, Paul just went, I'm not doing that, and for Phil, it was too late, the damage physically had been done. So, it's just, it was hard, it's sad that they never got that. They could never reach out. And it was sad, because if they did in their 20s, Phil had addiction issues. And that's and unfortunately it manifested for him into this terrible cancer, which was just heartbreaking. And for Paul, there was lots of things from his youth that were never addressed, that he really didn't seek the help. And I think a lot of the time people don't want to be vulnerable, they don't want to, it becomes a secret within themselves, and the shame and all of that stuff. And they fail to seek help, the help that they need,
Yeah.
And that's part of the grief,
What like you're seeing with this, it's interesting because you had you shut down and moved, right? So you changed your life, right? So you had all of that energy and the drive and pivot, were pivoting and making things work, and then
yeah.
you changed places, right? You moved out of that environment, the place you'd chosen to support you, and move up into a very peaceful place of the world, like far north coast, but a very different feel, right? What were you seeking?
Peace, I think, and just to be quiet. And the first, I think I moved here in August 2021 into Bellingen, beautiful. And I just, I've got a nice little view I'm in town from my back deck looking at the mountains and the bush. And I think I literally just, after Paul died, which was earlier that same year, I just stared at the mountains for about 6 months and didn't move. I was in so much pain. I can't even describe the pain, but I don't even know what that pain was, but it was just physical pain. Like it was just debilitating. Yeah. And a few months after Phil died, I was given this beautiful brown Labrador who was 2 years old, who unfortunately died last year. Yeah, I know, at 8, anyway. But he was fabulous for grief. So, that really helped, to have that just, after Phil died, a few months after he died, that actually took me out of, or after Mum died, a few months after Mum died, that actually put me straight in the real moment, stopped me from being in my head so much. So there's a lot to be said about animals, comforting you. So we together sat on the deck and stared for 6 months.
You in the brown lab looking at mountains.
In the brown lab, yeah, and it's
the formula for like we can describe that for other people. Well, this is what you do to get over terrible grief.
Just I think too, the business, all those years I was running every day, I was paying for my Apple stock every day and ordering every day. It was like a roller coaster ride for 20 something years. So I was a bit burnt out, besides everyone dying, so.
Right.
So really just to be quiet, just to be quiet and is the best recovery, I think, to be quiet and try and be alone with yourself. It's not that easy sometimes, still struggling with it.
It's incredibly brave. When you're alone with yourself, the thoughts are the thoughts.
Yeah.
There's no distraction, right? You can't sort of drown out the reviewing your relationships with the people who are gone.
Yeah.
You can't do that with noise from someone else. You've got to deal with it. So, is that been like something, if you look at that, is that something you've invited that in? Is that something worthwhile?
I needed to be, I think I've never not lived or had to look after someone or something or whatever. So I needed that for myself. I needed that. And I'm lucky that I've actually got quite a few girlfriends that have moved up here who have been in similar situations, who have somehow, become these Bellingen, nomads, that have arrived in Bellingen and found new roots here, which is great. So I've got an instant community of friends.
It's the next version of Eat, Pray, Love, right? It's now like escape, look at mountains and recover, right?
Yeah. But if I think about when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was live that area, Dulwich Hill, Summerhill, and see some trees. So it's exactly what's happened at the end
You've
of the
fulfilled that long term.
day.
Are you going to be okay? Is this like,
Yeah.
do you think this is moving you to a place where you live fulfilled? Like the sadness you talk about just, breaks my heart.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
it's sort of still does my head in. I still sort of think, what was that? It was just terrible. But you listen to other people's stories and you think a lot of people have been through a lot of tragic, terrible things, and they just, I think the thing is you've got to try and keep moving forward and not look back on that stuff too much and try and analyze it, which I'm prone to do. I've got to stop myself from doing that. I sort of help volunteer at the radio station here a little bit, to
yeah,
Triple
lovely.
E.
Yeah.
And when I moved here, I did a diploma in family history at
Wow.
UTAS. So that's taken me in a different direction of genealogy. And so I'm always busy, like I've always got plenty to do. But the change of life thing, change of, coming up here, changing your whole life, I think it's a sustainable, good decision that I've made, you know. Yeah.
I love the way I love describing it like that. Sustainable, good decision, right? It's like
Yeah,
it's a
it is a
very
good
practical,
decision.
it seems
Mm.
like a safe and grounded
It's
place to be.
very, I was going to say, it's a very grounding place and it's still very country here. So, and, hats off to people here are just authentic. And a lot of people do it, they're leading a tough life. They
Yeah.
they help you toughen up,
Yeah,
They
wow.
help you
Yeah.
toughen up by you just think, you look at what people do here and how they live and on their farms and you think, wow, they're really, you know, uh, yeah.
No room for that Northern Beaches privilege here.
No,
No.
Sydney. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah. None of that up here. Not really. But but it's a great environment. It's old school, really. It's a
Yeah.
bit old school. So I think that things are simpler. People have got more time for you. There's a lot of trust. Like I really noticed that when I came up here that, you can ask someone to help you with something, you shake a hand on it. That's it. You've
Yeah.
said there's no, having to there's a lot of trust, it's really lovely. Yeah. Yeah.
That's extraordinary. In some ways, I talk about, I've spoken about the bringing the village back.
Yeah,
When, is that sort of what
absolutely.
you're feeling?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that that's a healthy way to live. Like I remember with the COVID lockdowns in Avalon, and as much as it was crazy and no one knew what was happening, it was really nice to see dads at home and dads riding their bikes down the street with the kids. And, all of a sudden there was this whole community that arrived, without, I mean, years and years ago, people used to work and live in the same town, didn't they? They
Yeah.
didn't go
Yeah, they did.
across the other side of Sydney to work. People lived and worked locally, which was very healthy. And it's a bit more like that here, I
Mm.
guess.
Mm.
So I think that that's a healthy thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Can I ask a heavy question?
Yes.
Um, you talked about so eloquently described the pain. It was real, in what you said, and it really touched me. The pain you were feeling was so overwhelming. Why didn't you follow Paul's example? Like so often we hear
Mm.
that the pain's too much, and then we just want to get away from it.
I
What?
can understand the temptation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand the temptation. I mean, there's 5 kids in my family. I was always very close to Paul. As was my oldest. Well, Paul and he took me under his wing when he was a teenager because I was very depressed and bullied at school and whatever.
Right.
And he just said, Dad, I think we should be able to take Margot to Haberfield Rowing Club with me and my mates on a Sunday night. So then some of their other sisters came. So Paul always, we could see that in each other.
Yeah.
I could see he really saved me in my teens, I think,
Wow.
from possibly something terrible. I was tempted. I mean, I can understand that temptation,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I think seeing the fallout from Paul and how it's just affected so many lives, and he would hate to think that he's, caused this chaos in other people's lives. he didn't realize what a train wreck it leaves, in everyone around him.
Yeah.
And I think that would be an awful legacy, like for my kids to, to have to deal with. I don't think that's fair,
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that he would have hated to have thought that that's what the outcome is, or can be. So yeah, that's possibly why, the main reason. But it's not an easy subject to talk about, but it's very prevalent, unfortunately. Yeah.
And thank you. Thanks. That's like such an honest and sort of like, connecting answer. I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, it's life.
It is. And this is all life, right? And of course, life goes on for you in an idyllic part of the world, right? You've moved from, one idyllic part to another in my mind. So it's not easy, or, you've got the village and the mountains, but, that pain is with you. What are you looking forward to? What's left? Young, bottle, intelligent woman, what are you going to do?
Well, I don't know. It's taken me a while to see that there's it's probably only just started to happen this year after that drama, to see that there is a point to doing anything, you know what I mean? So after everyone died, I sort of thought, well, what's the point? Like, you're here on this earth for such a short amount of time. Why are we bothering to do anything, sort of thing? So I have regained that momentum quite a bit in the last year, I'd say, to actually think about looking forward to something. It's trying to get that sense of joy back in life a bit. So, that's my objective, is to try and keep moving forward. Yeah.
And what do you think now is joy? What will that look like, maybe?
Joy is peace, I think, in a way. It's in yourself, peace in yourself, being true to, what's right for you, how you want to live, and also those relationships around you that don't work for you, letting go of them. It's not easy, but sometimes I think the older I get, the more I have been inclined to draw the line, which I don't know if that's good or bad. But anyway, that's sort of what happens when you turn 60, I think, and above.
It is what it is, right? It's
like to go, well, not doing that anymore. I'm not interested. So that sort of stuff becomes clearer, and I think that's the age thing a little bit as well. That your time seems to be a little bit more precious in a way, so you don't want to waste it on things that don't mean anything to you. So yeah. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, I love. But I don't know. It's a good place to launch into the next bit, because we'll find out, right? So as long as we're here and we're still willing to bravely step out, which you have role modeled for us today so beautifully. The whole process of what you've gone through and how you've found some place to ground and to heal. It's been wonderful to share that. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I appreciate your interest in my story.
It's an incredible story. Margo Strong, thank you on behalf of Kintsugi Heroes and all our listeners out there. We really appreciate your story today, and thank you, and wish you a million good things from here. May you find that joy.
Well, I'm winning the lottery today, apparently. So.
Good news. All right. I'll put my hand out for that later. Just for a quick tip.
Okay.
Fabulous news, right? I'll pass that on to the crowd. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Margo.
No worries. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Kintsugi Heroes. Thank you to Colin Lilly for permission to use Broken as our theme music for this series. If you enjoyed this conversation, share share the podcast with a friend and let us know by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support Kintsugi Heroes and the stories we share, head to kintsugiheroes.com.au and follow the instructions to make a tax-deductible donation. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.